Right, so the Rochdale by-election is getting a fair amount of attention on social media at the moment, if only cursory mention in the mainstream press, mainly because this is Labour's seat to lose, and it looks very much like they may well do that. Despite being in the run-up to a general election this year, they've been 14 years out of power and really should be increasing the size of their majorities and held seats instead of facing losing them. It really does make a mockery of national polling and the huge lead Labour apparently is enjoying. It's worth about as much as one of Keir Starmer's policy pledges, really, isn't it? The main opposition to Labour in this election, the anti-Starmer vote, is very much coming from the Workers' Party of Great Britain leader George Galloway, himself no stranger to controversy. But with Labour getting heckled, their candidate getting rubbished publicly, and given the significant Muslim vote playing its part in this by-election, things look bad for Labour. But if anything is guaranteed to get the backs of many people up, this latest piece of news concerning Labour's candidate might just hand this seat to Galloway for certain. Right, so the Rochdale by-election, triggered by the sad passing of the Labour MP Tony Lloyd, who won the seat for Labour under Jeremy Corbyn in 2017, all despite the former Labour MP Simon Danczuk having been suspended pending a Labour investigation into reports he had been sexting with a 17-year-old. He was nearly 50 at the time. This resulting in his suspension from the party. He was barred from standing in the 2017 snap election called by Theresa May as a result, having shamelessly stayed in his post as an independent despite everything. He stood as an independent in that 2017 election at that too, having quit the Labour Party shortly beforehand, knowing he wouldn't be selected to stand for them, and came fifth. He swore he'd never stand again though, and yet, lo and behold, he's standing again. A candidate for Rochdale once more, but this time standing for Reform UK. That's quite a swerve to the right, but in his case perhaps not really that surprising, and shows frankly that Reform will take anybody. Now Labour have held this seat since 2010 when Danczuk bucked the national trend of Labour losing seats under Gordon Brown that year to win Rochdale. And it's pretty solidly Labour these days, having been held by all three main parties at one time or another in the past, having semi-regularly changed hands over the years. Tony Lloyd again held the seat in 2019, and his majority stands at 9,668, which is a fairly healthy Labour majority, isn't it? The Tories were a distant second, and all other parties that stood in 2019 were well off the pace. Now, there's little to get excited about with the Lib Dems. To this day, I don't get the point of them, and led by another knight of the realm just as Labour is, they will probably do about as well as they did last time, if not worse, since turnout is often down in by-elections. Last time out, they got just 7% of the vote. The Tories are electorally dead in the water, as is common knowledge really by now, completely rudderless, and after Sunak's antics at PMQs yesterday, once again mocking trans people when the mother of murdered student Brianna Gay was in the gallery watching, was obscene, there's no other word for it, and with only weeks to go until this by-election is held, the 29th of this month, that is something that isn't likely to be forgotten either. Of the remaining candidates, it would be remiss of me to not comment on the mess of a situation that has arisen around the Green Party candidate. My party, after all. It appears due diligence failed somewhere. Some horrendous previous comments have come to light from this candidate. The party has said there will be an investigation. They won't comment publicly on that, which is fine, so long as some kind of resolution to what happened and how such things cannot happen again is made public later on. You need to show that you're fixing this. The candidate, however, will remain on the ballot but won't campaign. So they've blown this one, sadly. But this brings us to the matter of Labour's candidate, basically in a head-to-head now against George Galloway, the leader of the Workers' Party of Great Britain. And regardless of your thoughts about Galloway, he is very much a Marmite candidate, a very polarising character. There's no disputing that for various reasons, none of which I'm going to go into here. But however you view him, with the state of the House of Commons right now, can you imagine him taking a seat there? It'd be a political bloodbath. The entertainment value alone almost makes him worth the vote, surely, on its own. He's gone to Rochdale and he has filled venues, he's picked up his megaphone, he's got his soapbox out and he's pulled in the crowds. He has made himself the anti-Starmer vote in Rochdale, and with the large Muslim population there, Galloway's lifelong support for Palestine and Gaza, especially in the here and now, is very appealing there. Now, as regular viewers will know, I've spoken a lot about the strength and influence of the Muslim vote in this country, especially in certain seats where there is a large Muslim demographic, and Rochdale is one of them. It has the 18th largest Muslim population by constituency in the country, with just over 30% of the population identifying as Muslim, so basically 1 in 3, let's round it up. That's very bad news for Labour right now, who, as the recent polling by the Labour Muslim Network has shown, they potentially lost half of their Muslim voter support now. A quick bit of maths based on the 2019 general election stats would imply there are some 24,000 Muslim votes up for grabs in Rochdale, and if Labour have lost half, that's 12,000 votes gone, which is more than their majority. Should they back Galloway en masse, along with everyone else who will, because they're fed up with Labour as well, he can quite conceivably win this and win it comfortably. But there are other factors I haven't spoken about yet, which might hand this to Galloway yet on a plate, as the bookies have already slashed odds on him winning now to just 2-1. Things are so bad on the doorstep apparently in Rochdale that Keir Starmer has been told to stay away. You have to remember, we're in a general election year here. After 14 years out of power, Labour should be bullish and romping around the country, announcing that it's theirs to win next time. Yet instead they're being catcalled in the street for their ongoing support of the genocide in Gaza, siding with Israel just as the Tory government are. Labour MPs are fleeing public meetings for fear of the protesters that have got word of where they are, and frankly if Starmer showed up in Rochdale there would be a lot more of that. But that isn't the bit that'll gift this seat to Galloway. For that we need to talk a little bit about Labour's candidate here, who I haven't actually mentioned up until now. This is a chap called Azhar Ali, and he's the current leader of the Labour group on Lancashire County Council. There are all manner of mainstream paper puff pieces, nationally and locally, about him right now to big up this figure unknown to most of the country. So let's introduce him a little bit. He's a former advisor to Tony Blair. He had a 5-year stint working for Blair and later Gordon Brown, advising on counter-terrorism in the wake of the 2005 London bombings. He's a former director of the Sufi Muslim Council, a non-governmental organisation supposedly dedicated to furthering the cause of Islam, to represent Sufi Muslims and tackle extremism, particularly Islamic extremism as they put it. You might be surmising a bit of a theme building up here. The SMC, as it abbreviated to, was set up by Ali along with another chap called Harris Rafiq, who later went on to the Quilliam Foundation, a now thankfully defunct think tank which championed what they called moderate Muslim voices, whilst tackling everything else as Islamic extremism. It's a novel way of shutting up your critics to call them all extremists, but isn't that essentially what Israel do to their critics? Anyway, Ali, by this point, had got on board with Tony Blair's Prevent strategy, so much so that he was described in 2016 by Lancashire County Council as a champion of the Prevent agenda. Prevent was Tony Blair's anti-radicalisation strategy, the aim purportedly to stop people becoming groomed into becoming terrorists or supporting terrorism. Now, the description of terrorism from establishment sources is especially problematic these days, in light of the word constantly being used in association with Hamas, but not with Israel. And as such, Prevent has become synonymous, in fact, with not meeting those ideals. But subsequent reports on it have described it as having been ineffective and counterproductive, and having been built on Islamophobia. Because just like Quilliam, it only found certain Muslim voices to be acceptable, and all others by default were extremist. So you've got a Muslim chap in Azhar Ali championing, on the face of it at any rate, the dilution of Muslim voices via Prevent and the Sufi Muslim Council, which received funding as one of several national Prevent projects, funding for which purportedly ran to several £1,000s, or hundreds of thousands of pounds even. Another organisation, Cage International, who are an advocacy group helping communities impacted upon by the war on terror, rather interestingly, given the current political landscape, once said of the SMC that the Sufi Muslim Council was a state-sponsored effort celebrated by the pro-Israel Zionist Board of Deputies to engineer a politically acceptable Islam. It aligns perfectly with the aims of the Islamophobic Prevent programme. The Labour Party has, over the last 2 decades, been complicit in the genocide of the War on Terror that saw upwards of 1 million people killed, and now again through its unconditional support for Israel. Labour believes it can get away with assisting the genocide in Gaza by selecting party machine products with Muslim identities. Muslim communities must build power outside the broken Westminster bubble in order to protect our community and defend our common values. So does that sum up Azhar Ali then? A machine product Muslim working towards a form of acceptable Islam, with that acceptability being measured against what Israel will accept? It's actually him that has asked Keir Starmer to stay away from Rochdale until the day after the election, should he win, as his presence wouldn't help him given the large Muslim population in Rochdale. And to give an example of why this is such a big issue for Ali, here's how you deal with a Labour canvasser there right now.
Hello? Hello? Yeah?
Yeah? No, we don't support Zionists. Bye.
Hey?
We don't support Zionists. You can go away.
Thank you. We're not Zionists.
Yes, you are.
Sorry. Bye-bye.
Yeah, okay, bye.
If you're led by a Zionist without qualification, then the whole party is tainted by that. But let's be honest, Starmer is hardly the only one guilty. You have Labour Friends of Israel too. One such member being Louise Ellman. Have you heard of her? Formerly an MP, left the Labour Party, citing anti-Semitism under Corbyn, has come back under Starmer because he's much more her type. And here she is, pictured here with Afzar Ali. No smoke without fire here. You have a guy here who is a Muslim, is getting roasted publicly wherever he goes by other Muslims as he's campaigning, but one who has, on the face of it, spent his time in the Labour Party working towards an acceptable form of Islam rather than listening to all Muslim voices. And that acceptability appears to be being measured against whether the Zionist Labour Party and their Zionist supporters and backers find it acceptable or not, to then demand the rest of us, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, to accept that. Well, with anti-Zionism now a protected characteristic, none of us should pay the blindest heed to that notion any longer. And frankly, if the backstory to Labour's candidate were far more widely known about, George Galloway should win this and then some, thus proving independent candidates and those from smaller parties who position themselves on the side of what is right and what is just can and will defeat those in the main parties with their abhorrent agendas already bought and paid for by vested interests. And in that light, here's a video recommendation all about the British Palestinian woman looking to send Starmer's health privatising fanboy Wes Streeting packing from Parliament come the next election. Definitely somebody else to rally behind, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.